Welcome, everyone, to the Sustainability Committee meeting of City of Tarpon Springs, Florida, this Thursday, June 16th at 6 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and can we please get a roll call?
Chairperson Dory Larson,
Present.
Vice Chairperson Paul Robinson,
Here.
Member Taylor Mandalou, Member Denise Menino,
Here.
Member Karen Gallagher, Member Robin Sanger,
Here.
Member Carol Mickett.
Here.
All right, so welcome, everybody. We've got a full house. It's like a party in here. Very exciting. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from May 19th, 2022, and then also approval of minutes from May 20th, 2021. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, very good. That was easy. Next item is a follow-up on public engagement. Robin's going to walk us through the workshop and survey update.
Do we have to do the other minutes?
Sorry?
Weren't there 2 minutes?
Yes.
Yes, we just approved.
Oh,
them
you
both.
did both at the
Yes.
same time? Oh, I didn't follow that.
Here, getting,
It's too late.
okay,
They were perfectly fine from what I can recall.
very good. Okay, then Robin, floor's yours.
So as you know, we wrapped up our public workshops last month. They went pretty well. We had some very interested community members who we engaged with. At our first workshop, we had 2 participants.
Oh,
At our second workshop, we had 6 participants, and at the third, we had 11 participants. So we effectively doubled at each workshop in numbers. However, we did get some good quality conversations that were able to take place, given that it was a small group and a roundtable setting. So we are currently sorting through the feedback right now. I was going to introduce her during staff comments, but I'll introduce her now. Michelle is our sustainability intern this summer, and she is helping me to sort through this feedback. She was with me at the workshops, and so at our next meeting, we can go into more in depth into our feedback because we're still analyzing it now. But I will give some highlights of some of the feedback that we got from the workshops and from the survey. So there were some main themes, some main topics that came up multiple times during each workshop. Some of those themes were natural resource protection, housing affordability, pedestrian safety, funding for seniors, children, and art programs, accessibility to community resources, making them more accessible to diverse community members of all ages, flood control, prevention and resilience, water quality, energy efficiency, cost control for water and electricity, historic preservation, homeless assistance and poverty prevention, economic development and downtown redevelopment and revitalization. Education and outreach was a common theme across most goal areas individually as well. And food system improvements. So we did get a lot of very broad feedback from the workshops, maybe even more broad than the survey, because the survey is more targeted. You're kind of within the limits of the question answer choices that we provided. So we did get some very broad feedback from the workshops, which likely, is because it was such a collaborative atmosphere with the roundtables, led to some more in-depth conversations. The overall feedback that we received from the survey kind of had a little bit of a different focus than some of the feedback that we received from the workshops. There were, of course, some responses to each that were kind of hyper-focused to people's homes or areas, issues that are very close to them, but overall, we did have some broader themes. So from our survey, we had a total of 170 responses. Most from the demographic data, most of them were white residents living near Craig Park, making over $100,000 per year. Most believe climate change is happening now, affecting us right now. There was a lot of concern about aging infrastructure, listing this as one of our biggest stresses, along with traffic congestion and coastal water rise. Most listed, or the majority rather, listed that what they want to see in the plan is environmental conservation and protection of local ecosystems, livability, smart growth, and protection of important public infrastructure. Some community services needed were listed as renewable energy resources and funding opportunities for residents and businesses to improve. Healthcare services were listed multiple times. Many have noted that they have experienced deteriorated infrastructure, failing major appliances, and hurricane or tropical storm evacuations. The majority of people taking sustainable actions mention that they currently work to reduce their waste and recycle as the action that they take currently. Many mentioned a desire to use renewable energy, but listed cost as a barrier to obtaining renewable energy, and as well as electric vehicles. Many also mentioned a desire to purchase local foods and to drive an electric or hybrid vehicle. But that question actually, I believe the question is, what actions would you like to begin doing for sustainability? That was our most skipped question. So we had the least response rate to that question in particular, actually. And there was, in general, quite a lot of recycling concerns. People want to see more recycling. So again, we're still working through all of these written responses. At the next meeting, we'll be able to have graphics and really visualize that data and break it down very thoroughly for you to be able to review in advance of the meeting so that we can have an in-depth conversation at the next meeting. But that was just kind of an overall view at some of the data that we received.
I have two questions. One, when you read those lists, was that having priority, or did you just put it all together? Like, the first thing you listed, was that the biggest response?
Yes, so we, at the workshops, we went through the exercise where at the end of our conversation, they were given stickers to rank, what items were of most importance to them. So we actually tallied up those rankings. So that's what that is based on, which items had the highest rankings. What did people vote for?
In-person events, was there diversity in the people?
I would say overall there was. We had at our first workshop, there was some, it was a very small workshop, but we had some representation. Yes, very small. We had some younger community members, college student, and we had some variety of ages across the workshops. We had some community members who mentioned that they came from the Union Academy neighborhood in attendance at our workshops. So I would say there was some, if you keep in mind that out of 19
And was
total
there
participants.
gender diversity?
There were a good blend of male and female participants.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Ron, on that. What do you think could have been done differently to have higher attendance at those? Because I feel like there was a push, and you were at a lot of the community events advertising that they were there, but we have 26,000 residents in Tarpon Springs and have 19 show up between 3 different options for dates. What do you think our barrier was to getting more people there, and how do we avoid that in the future, not just as a sustainability committee, but as other people are moving forward trying to get responses in the community engagement? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I think there are several factors that played into that. One was during the time frame of our workshops, there happened to be a lot of other city workshops going on with strategic plan and comprehensive plan and like historic preservation, and there were several other workshops going on, some even on the same days. Okay. So that could be, there's also something called workshop fatigue, where people just kind of get tired to go into all these workshops. So we might have experienced some of that. Some could have been from competition or from some workshop fatigue. We did find that the third workshop had the best attendance, and that was actually an evening workshop. That was the only one of the 3 that took place on an evening. So it could be that maybe the timing that we chose for the first 2 wasn't the best time to engage with the community. Our first one was on a Saturday afternoon, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., and obviously that had our poorest attendance. Our second one was on a Tuesday, same time frame, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., and we got some community members, but that could also be a factor. But it's hard to say the exact reason. That's kind of what I speculate could have played into that.
Okay, and then the other question I had is on the 170 survey responses. Are you still accepting surveys coming in?
We are not.
Okay, that's what, so your total is 170.
Right,
Do you,
we ended
are
it
you
now.
happy with that? I mean, obviously, we'd like more, but in the scheme of like when Pinellas County did their survey for sustainability, I don't know what percentage rate, you know, what the percentage of respondents were. Where do we kind of fall? Or how are we, should we be happy with 170? I mean, or again, what do you think's stopping more people from being involved with what we're doing?
I am personally happy with 170.
Okay.
I think it was, it exceeded my expectations.
Okay.
But, you know, compared to Pinellas County, I think that their percentage was something like 0.05. I believe they had around 1,000 responses out of something like 1 million residents, and we
Okay.
received 170 out of 26,000. So I think we did have a higher percentage response rate than the county did. As far as how it compares to the other local municipalities, I'd have to do some more research, but I personally thought 170 seemed like a pretty good number. But.
Yeah, no, I was surprised, you know, in a good way. I was actually very surprised that we had 170.
Comes
because-
to about 0.7%.
Okay.
And if you multiplied that times 1 million, you know, as far as, yeah, well, I have to get back to you on that math, but I think actually that percentage, it sounds low, but 170 for this population is pretty good.
Pretty good. Okay, thanks, Rob.
So I think we've learned that Saturdays are no good, especially at the beginning of summer when everybody wants to be out on their boat instead. Lesson learned. But thank you, Robin, for all of your work getting that.
Picking up with what Karen said, is it possible to have workshops like this, like go to the PTA and say, will you in your next meeting set aside time for a sustainability workshop? Or a church that has a lot of people, will you announce that after the service, we're going to have this? So there's already people gathered in a place, and maybe chat with like the PTA people or the people who run the church. But that might be a way of getting people to attend, because they're already there, they're already interested people who are community-minded. So, I don't know, it just popped in my head when you were saying that.
I think we're suspending like community engagement at this point, right? I mean, like we've completed it for this,
Right, for the purposes
for the
of
purposes of
plan.
this, yeah.
But
But that's a good
that
idea
is a
for
good
in the
idea.
future. Yeah, for sure. And then also welcome, Michelle. Pleasure to have you with us. I'm glad that you are here. All right, if nothing else about that, so looking forward to getting a more in-depth analysis at our next meeting. So we have a presentation next on the Whitcomb Bayou project from Arcadis. And I just want to level set for this agenda item that we're allocating about a half an hour. So 15 minutes for the presentation, 15 minutes for question and answer, so that we have enough time for all of the other fun things we have planned for tonight. Good, take it away.
Thanks. So it's great to be back here. I'm Bob Robertson, Project Administration Department Director, and I'm just going to introduce Arcadis. They're going to give you this presentation. They're going to give you an update, basically, since the last time we talked to you, I think, was February. Since that time, we've had a public meeting that was pretty well attended. We had something like, I think it was 26, 28 people attend that meeting and give us written comments. And then we put the alternatives that you're going to see on Connect Tarpon and got another 120 some responses. So out of 150 responses, we got some pretty good feedback to work with going forward here. But we took the advice of this committee. We improved those graphics. And so that's what you've seen at the public meeting and what you'll see today. On the line is Johnny Stewart. He's a project manager with Arcadis. We're making the unusual move of, I got special permission to allow him to join us. He's got an injury he's dealing with and couldn't drive, but we're glad he can be here to do this presentation. And with him is Paul Wolanski, also from Arcadis, and they're going to tag team this presentation here in a couple of pieces. So, Johnny, are you there?
I am there. Is everyone able to see my screen?
We can see the Whitcomb Bayou Alternatives Analysis and Funding Strategy slide,
Awesome.
number 1.
And you're not able to see me, correct?
Correct.
That's okay. Okay, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, the public, and those assembled from the city. Really happy to have this opportunity to present this project update on the Whitcomb Bayou Alternatives Analysis and Funding Strategy. As Bob said, thank you for making some accommodations for me. I'm on crutches for the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, I would have loved to be there with you guys in person. We have and in an interest of time, seeing that we have 30 minutes to do this, we do have a designated QA part of this presentation at the end. However, feel free to stop us at any point in time, ask some questions. Would like this to be a conversation as well. I'll just quickly introduce myself since I wasn't able to present in front of this board the last time. So I am based in Arcadis' Miami office. I've been with the firm about 4 years, part of the National Urban and Coastal Resilience practice, but I focus primarily on Florida. So I'm the resilience planning lead for Arcadis' North America practice here in Florida. Prior to that, I've spent maybe a dozen years between city and county government down in South Florida, city of Miami and Miami-Dade County. First working in sustainability. So sustainability is very near and dear to my heart. But then also before I left local government, really spent the last 5 years of my time there working on climate adaptation and resilience, especially issues to deal with flood risk and those around sea level rise. So very relevant to what's happening here on the west coast of Florida. Spent a lot of time studying it. So I will just quickly go over today's agenda. All right, so I'll really go very quick over the flood risk overview. I know you guys have had some understanding of that from our previous presentation, but I'll just do it really quickly, especially for some members in the public. I'll give a quick update of where we stand today in our project update, what's been done so far, where we are, and an outline and overview of what's to come next. At that point, I'll turn it over to Paul Wolanski, there in person, who will give an overview of the alternatives and present those to you. And then I'll close up with an overview of how we are aligning that with, hopefully, with available funding streams at the federal and state level. So very quickly, as you all well know, you're seeing increased flood risk around the Whitcomb Bayou on the Tampa Bay area in general. But extreme high tides, heavy precipitation, especially with aging infrastructure, increased risk from coastal storms and hurricanes, et cetera. So all of these are being exacerbated, as you know, by sea level rise. So planning for future conditions is very important. I don't think I need to tell you that. In Pinellas County, using the NOAA intermediate scenario from 2017, sea levels are expected to rise up to about 4 feet through 2100. Just included this as what the county is using generally to communicate sea level rise throughout its jurisdiction. The extent of sea level rise is going to differ by local characteristics, et cetera. And these projections are refined usually on 5-year increments as data becomes better and clearer. But I just wanted to give you a general overview of that. We'll get into levels of protection and return periods when Paul presents, but generally what we're trying to do here, and I'll explain further on, is to protect Whitcomb Bayou to the 10-year annual chance of return interval for flood. So that's about 5.8 feet above any VD navigation. The reason why we did not go to a higher level of, or try to design this project with a higher level of flood protection is because doing so affects the feasibility of this project, especially from an enjoyment point of view. So there has to be trade-offs between what we can protect, costs, and also how residents utilize this important asset in the community. So going higher than that is really compromise views and vistas and access to the bayou and use of it. So part of where we settled on a good flood protection level is the 10-year event. Just quickly, work completed to date. So we started off this engagement, and we're doing this in partnership with Cardinal. But we started off this engagement with a very high-level technical feasibility analysis, where we did some, rudimentary data review, understanding the conditions and the impacts that are happening there, and started thinking about what could be some of the interventions and mitigation strategies to reduce flood risk in this area. Thereafter, we did that in concert with Bob and his team and other stakeholders for the city. And thereafter, we presented to this committee in February for that very high-level technical feasibility presentation of alternatives. And then thereafter, we took back the feedback that we gained from you, further refinement with the city to frame that into more of what you're going to see here, which is the alternatives analysis. That technical feasibility presentation, the high-level one, was also presented by Bob and his team to the board. And then continuous refinement through public engagement and refinement that's going to happen from this point here on out as well, with further public engagement and the results of the online survey, anything that we'll get from this committee, especially with comments and reviews of our deliverables, and also with other stakeholders like Pinellas County. We are going to refine this further and present a more final depiction of our alternatives to the board in July. Also, I just skipped a step. One thing that we are going to do, and I'll go over this as well, is to ensure that whatever we are doing here and we're presenting is as feasible as possible to align with available funding streams to facilitate implementation. This current engagement that we have ends, I believe, in August, but thereafter there is some steps that, and we'll go into some of the recommendations of what needs to happen beyond that. But at a very high level and generally, I know the city has had some recent funding from the state to complete a vulnerability assessment around flood risk and sea level rise. That's a crucial component, not only to advance this project, but funding in general. And then ongoing coordination with the county and other stakeholders, and we'll continuously refine funding options and alignment with them. And as I go into my presentation, you'll see that funding it's not necessarily a one-for-one type of application. There's a number of different ways that we can leverage funding, and things change over time. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Paul there in person to really dive into the alternative analysis, and I'll join you back when we get into funding. Paul?
Great, thank you, Johnny. Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be back again talking to you about the Bayou flood protection alternatives. Some of the things that you've heard before if you were in the meeting back in February, but this is what, as Johnny alluded to, right here on the screen, you see this is the 10-year flood inundation map for Wickham Bayou area. So in the pink are all the areas that would experience flooding at a 10-year flood event. So that's what these flood alternatives that we've developed are trying to.
Yellow things are houses?
Yep. The yellow and reds and purples are houses.
And then why aren't those houses flooded? Is that
they're at higher elevation, the houses?
because the houses are up? So that's like their roof or something?
Right, it would be the roof steps, yep.
But all their land around them would be flooded?
Right, yes, correct.
So it would go in their house nevertheless?
Right, at this 10-year flood event, water could intrude into the homes, yes.
Okay. That was not clear to me.
Yes.
Thank you.
No problem. So the flood protection that alternatives I'm going to explain to you, they're going to be implemented. We're proposing them to be implemented all around the Whitcomb Bayou, from Craig Park in the northwest to the all around the bayou to the northwest corner, where we have to tie into a higher ground there so that we can keep the flood waters from coming around the system. Another thing I want to point out on this graphic is that even if we implement the flood protection alternatives all around Whitcomb Bayou, there is another component of the flood system that needs to be addressed as well, and that's in the bottom right hand corner, in the southeast corner of the bayou. There's a bridge that leads you to the canals and people's homes on the canals, and even if you install flood protection all around the bayou, the floodwaters can go into those canals, and those canals seawalls are at a lower elevation, and the water could go above those seawalls and flood from behind your system. So you need to be able to protect those homes and the canals. So some kind of flood protection gate at the bridge there needs to be also part of the flood protection of this whole system, so that in order to make sure that there's no floodwaters can't go behind your flood protection system. So just wanted to point that out. But I'll go over what the three alternatives that we presented at the public involvement meeting. If you want to go to the next slide. Thank you, Johnny. So alternative one is we're proposing a T-wall. So there's it is a concrete barrier wall. I know some people at the public meeting thought it looks similar to a Jersey barrier, but it has a foundation underneath that's looks like a T, and that's how it gets its name as a T-wall. And then but you only see the top, the wall part, the foundation's not below the ground. And so this would be installed in the right-of-way all around the bayou. And if you see on the top right corner, along the wall at where there are public docks, we would need to install a watertight gate that would be self-closing, so that the public would still have access to the docks. And we tried to, in our graphics, we tried to put in some plantings in front of the wall to make it look more aesthetically pleasing. There are other options. Some folks at the public involvement meeting also suggested painting the wall or putting a nice scene of like a fish scene on it or something. So there could be other ways that you could beautify it a little bit so it's not an eyesore for the residents. But another thing I wanted to mention is that this option of the T-wall, as long as during design you plan ahead, this option is adaptive to be increased in the future if they wanted to add onto it to future levels of protection.
To make it higher?
Yeah, as long as you at the beginning design the foundation to be able to support that, you can make the wall higher at a later
Do you
date.
have to put rebar in and then build it up?
I guess that would be how they attach it to the wall below. Yes.
Okay.
So that is one advantage of this option for the future, and also we for all of the alternatives, which there's a living shoreline component. We want to make sure that if any mangroves that are disturbed around Whitcomb Bayou, which there are many, would be replanted, and other wetland plants would be implanted there, and riprap erosion protection to protect the shoreline. So we're planning on a living shoreline component for all the options. So that's option one. Let's go to the next slide, Johnny. Alternative two was road raising, so actually raising the existing road around Whitcomb Boulevard.
Can I ask you one question going
Sure.
back to that? It says useful life 50 years,
Right, that would be the design life of the system.
the design life. So when you're thinking about adding on top of it, would that be, I mean, it seems like that would be past that point, right? I mean, no? What is the timeline before we get to 50 years on the top of that wall?
Right, I mean, I guess probably when there's still at least half the life remaining, I would say, no more than 25 years, I would say, because wouldn't want to add onto it and then, not have, you're right, you're only going to have a useful life of 50 years for the bottom structure. So if you add on top of the wall, it's still going to, the life is not, you're not going to expand the life of the wall system.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So, the second alternative too is raising the road, and so this would be raising the road to the same level as the protection of the T-wall. One thing about raising the road is that any road drainage would have to be modified. Connections to any roads that come into Whitcomb Bayou would have to be modified. around the residences around Wickham Bayou, the driveways would have to be altered to meet the road properly. And I think in some cases, instead of draining away from properties, they would probably drain towards properties because the road would be higher. There would be, and there needs to be a swale to collect water probably around adjacent to the roadway. So also similar lifespan of 50 years on the road, but I think this was what maybe the least favorite option of the public meeting, but it is an option that it's the most expensive option, which we'll see later, but of the three alternatives. And then alternative 3 was an earth berm, which is exactly what it sounds, a earth mound around like a levee around the Wickham Bayou at the same elevation to the 10-year flood event. As you see here in the graphics, you can also, vegetation can be planted along the berm, which a lot of the residents really liked. There is a lot of people in the public meetings expressed the interest that they like the earth berm option, having a walking path around the bayou. In this case, we're just showing grass, but it could be paved if that was desired. But there would be any mangroves that were disturbed in this option would also be replanted as a living shoreline element. And there would need to be a little road path, 3 or 4 foot cleared zone between the road and the berm, so for walking. And then this option, just like the T-wall, is also adaptive to a future. You could also add more fill at a later date and raise the berm as well. So that's something else to consider.
I don't understand this one.
Which one?
Because the picture, I can't read these pictures correctly. So the one with the plants.
On the top
is-
right?
Yes, is the berm go up from the road?
Right, so you're looking across the road, and the berm goes up and then down.
And it goes down?
On the other side, yeah.
And previously, in the original picture, it's all straight across.
Right, that's existing
And
today.
then it goes all the way down to the water as a hill.
Right, that's how it is. It slopes down to the water today from the road.
Okay,
So, right, so the drainage will also have to be modified so that water doesn't pool up. It'll probably have to have pipes that go through the levee and to drain into the bayou just like it does today.
got it.
Right, and then we have alternative 4, which is a hybrid between the earth berm and the T-wall. And this one is really an interesting option because as you go around Wickham Bayou, the right-of-way it varies in width around there. So some sections, the right-of-way is smaller and some of it is wider. So you could do a hybrid of those two options. And in the areas that you have a small right-of-way, you put the T-wall, and the areas where the right-of-way is wider, you put the earth berm, and then you'd be able to tie them in, the wall and the berm, into each other around the bayou. So that's an option. So and that would minimize impacts to mangroves, and it also have the similar design life of the 50 years. But that's just a combination option.
So with the earth berm, where it's earth bermy, how do you get to the water? You have to put stairs in to get to docks and things
Right,
like
in the areas that to go over the berm, right, you probably have to put some stairs and a platform and stairs down, and then if you wanted to make it ADA compliant, you'd have to do a ramp back and forth to get over on both sides.
Because it would have to be ADA, wouldn't it?
It's private, so maybe not, but that's something we'd have to look into.
Right,
Okay.
right.
You indicated that in New Orleans, there was experience and a successful experience using T-walls.
Right.
What experiences have you or your colleagues at Arcadis have with each of these alternatives, and also what experience have you had with a hybrid formation?
Right. So Arcadis has done a lot of work in Louisiana after Katrina, and there was different wall systems that they had in place there. There was an eye wall system and a T-wall, and it was definitely from experience, the eye wall, there was a lot more failures of the eye wall system, and so that's why we're not recommending that in this case. And the T-walls had very good performance against the storms in Louisiana. So, and then earth berms, I personally have designed a lot of earth levees for the South Florida Water Management District, and they're with having the right specifications and using the right fill materials and sub-base. I think that it could be very, very effective having the earth berm. And of course, the road raising, I guess that speaks for itself, because the road would just be at a higher elevation, and the drainage would be modified to match existing drainage. So, and then I haven't, I mean, a lot of times walls and berms meet up together. The only disadvantage of that I think in this project, if you did both of them, was that if you wanted to have a nice walking path all around the bayou, that would be interrupted. So that would be a detriment, I guess, to that option.
In the locations in which you have a T-wall meeting a berm, the berm has a front face which is angled. The T-wall does not.
Right.
Do you have to have a connecting T-wall? How does that work?
It would actually be pretty much go right into the berm, and when the berm would come around it and slope down.
I see.
So, yeah.
In the insets that in which you show line of sight from a humanoid
Right.
Down to the water,
Yes.
how high is the porch on that house relative to the level of the road as it exists today? And how does that compare to the typical house along South Spring?
Right. So those are realistic figures. So where the pictures were from, which is on the south end of Whitcomb Bayou, we actually took this elevation data available at LiDAR, and we actually tried to see what the elevation of those homes there to the south were, and make a realistic line of sight from that point. So we haven't done the analysis from all around the bayou, but that was from the south homes. But we wanted to see how much of the view would be obstructed, and at that level, it didn't seem from the
The south
Right,
area of
at least-
South Spring is where you get the greatest flooding, or the most frequent flooding.
Okay, so but those are realistic figures. So
The price for the floating
the
barge is pretty expensive, but it's a 75-foot-long estimate.
right.
That doesn't look like a very big canal inlet. How big and how expensive would you think that an actual functioning floating platform would be in this location?
Yeah, we did a lot of research on it to try to come up with the conceptual designs, and we had looked at, actually, the problem is this needs to be a navigable gate system, and
Yeah.
that's what makes that's the problem. And so a sector gate was one of our first ideas, which actually is double the price of a floating barge. So that's what we were looking at internally. What other options do we have? And we haven't, we did measurements using Google Earth to see what the width across that canal length in front of the bridge is. And
Oh, I see.
that's where we came up with the 75 feet. But the barge would be in place, swung away from the bridge, and then as approaching storm, it would be then have to be swung back. And then after it's swung into place, it needs to be flooded, so then it seats down and provides you the flood barrier from the canal.
Do you have to have a human being on that structure at all times?
No, it would be unmanned most of the year. It would have to be operated and exercised probably at least once a year to make sure things are working. And so that's probably part of the operations maintenance cost per year.
Does it swing automatically, or do you have to have a human being on it?
No,
when
you
it
have to have
actually moves?
someone in place. I think there's like a winch, and you need a generator to pull it into place. And then there's pumps that would flood it. So yes, it needs power.
And it fits snug into what, earth on both sides?
It would be,
Or you-
there would be I guess, like bridge abutments,
I
on
see.
both sides where it would tie into, and then it would sink down to a floating platform, or, I'm not floating platform, but a submerged platform, and then that would seat and block the flood.
And how tall is it? I mean, I'm looking at the picture here.
Right, so I guess it would be designed, so there's a floating barge, and then there's a wall on top of the barge for your flood wall, and so that would be designed to whatever flood protection you wanted to protect to.
And
But
it's always there.
it would always be there, yeah. So that might not, it's probably, it would be like a barge sitting in the bayou, so that's going to be, I guess, of a concern of some residents as well, I guess, aesthetically.
What are the other options for
Right,
for that canal?
There is another option. I was just talking to some of our folks in our sustainability group, and there's a project in the Netherlands actually that used vertical slide gates instead, and we might be able to install several vertical slide gates. So the reason why we want to have several is that we might have one bigger slide gate in the middle for the boat vessel traffic, but if you only left that opening, we're concerned about stagnation in the canal, not being able to flush properly. And so, but if you had several gates, you could have them all lifted up so that there would be flow into the canals. And that structure could be separate from in front of the bridge, or we submitted our draft analysis report, and we've already got some good comments from the city. And there was one option about potentially integrating that vertical flood gate system into replacing the bridge. So that is something else we're going to look into and include in our final report. And there are some other funding opportunities if there's a transportation element like the bridge in the project. So there could be some other funding sources that could be looked into with that option as well.
What is the fill material you would use to make the earth berm?
Yeah, the technical term of it is a select fill, but it's just a mixture that has less clay material and less fragments. It's something that's more utilized for a base material, or something that's more structurally sound. That's what the I guess earth material would be.
So
It's soil still, but it's from you'd in your specification you'd actually recommend a particular source that it would have to come
and
from.
it doesn't have any toxic stuff in it,
No, definitely not.
and it won't wash away.
It would be designed, to withstand the storm events. And then the erosion protection in front of it and the living shoreline elements would help keep it protected as well.
I have a question about the mangroves, because my understanding is that this is probably the most disruptive. So would it look like removing all of the mangroves, building the berm, and then replanting? Or would it be trying to fill some dirt in on top and keep the mangroves the way that they are and hope they live?
Right. Well, ideally, we'd like to not disturb the mangroves if possible, but if they were going to be impacted, I think the best way would be to have them removed and then replanted afterwards. I don't know, Robin, if you have any experience with replanting mangroves, but we would want to we wouldn't want to destroy them, the ones there. We want to reuse them.
So my understanding is that if you remove the mangroves, it releases the CO2 that they have trapped. Is that true? And so that's why I think Dory's idea of how do you keep them there without moving them?
I guess the contractor would be responsible for maintaining them. I would think that they probably would be removed off site and taken care of, and then brought back when they're ready to be replanted. Because I'm not sure how you could take care of them on site with construction going on.
I think the CO2 in mangroves is contained within the roots.
Yeah, I think so
predominantly.
too.
I think if you don't burn them, you're not going to release CO2.
really?
You may release some
Yeah,
in
I thought it was
a
in the
relationship
soil
between the
too.
roots and the sea floor, but I don't think you release. I can't be very
Yeah.
specific
I
about that
thought
because I
it
don't know.
was also in the soil that would come up.
That's,
but
yeah, I mean, that's
if
true.
you pack them, maybe correct. That would be important to look into.
So yeah, that's what I was going to follow up with, is if we can get a better understanding of are the mangroves that are there, the intent is to replace them with the same mangroves that were there, or are we replanting with tiny little baby plants that are going to take 20 years to mature?
No, we'd definitely be replanting what was existing there and adding to it as well.
Okay. And then in terms of walkability, is there sidewalk on the opposite side all the way around the bayou? And is there any way that we could widen those or make improvements to those sidewalks with this project? No?
It was a hard time. We had a hard time getting the sidewalks in there now.
Okay.
So somebody asked me about this. Since my understanding is that the bridge at the yacht club is going to be repaired, which will take a number of years, And so all the traffic has to be diverted. And if this is going on at the same time, how does that work?
Jetpacks, kidding.
So it's very unlikely that they'll be going out at the same time, given the time frame of funding that we're going for with this.
Okay.
The county's project is looking to go to bid at the end of next year. But this is going to take several years to get the funding put together, especially if we're going to be looking at something to do with that bridge. And we're talking about a $30 million element of the project alone before we even touch berms and T-walls. So the answer is they're probably not going to overlap. And we also have the ability to schedule this project around the county's project to avoid that.
So the bridge at the yacht club's not happening for another year? I thought it was like this summer.
No, it's not going to bid till next year.
No.
Okay.
I have a question about the T-wall and the gates
Yes.
leading to the private docks. Who has the responsibility for maintaining those? And are they always closed? Are they only closed when we're expecting a higher tide? And what is the accessibility for those private citizens to actually be able to engage to open and close them? Like, I guess I don't understand exactly how they work.
Right, sure. So, so they would always be in place. They would be spring-loaded so that they would always shut closed unless somebody intentionally put something there to stop it. But the intention would be for it to always be closed so that there was never, so the city wouldn't have to go out and close them before a storm event, as long as residents didn't prop them open with a rock or something. I guess the city would be responsible for maintaining the gates.
Okay. And I mean, are they easy enough to open and close that somebody, could open and close them? Are they able to be locked so kids couldn't necessarily push them open? And, am I getting into too much of a finite area that hasn't been thought of? Like,
Right. I guess I don't. My understanding is that they would not be locked. That they would always be able to be opened, and so children would be able to open them. But I mean, right now they have the same access to those docks. There's no gates in front of those existing docks, right? No. Okay. There are some of them.
yes.
Yeah.
So the ones I saw down on the south end, I was able to walk out and take pictures from this water side there, so there was no gates there. It does say public.
Spring
trespass.
Bayou, there's locks.
yeah, there are locks on some of those, and
Right.
those gates are just your little wrought iron gates that, obviously anybody can push. I just don't know, like, how.
Right.
I'm thinking to myself that there's a concrete gate,
The
that's-
gate wouldn't be concrete, no. It
Okay.
would be I guess a steel watertight gate, but it wouldn't be something that, it wouldn't be something that someone couldn't easily open. But it would be spring-loaded to make sure it stays closed.
Thank you.
And as the water rises, that pressure on it will keep it closed and make it very difficult to push open if there's.
Right, it would be designed to make sure that it wouldn't, even if the water was to the top of the wall, that the gate would not fail.
If somebody wanted to lock the gate, would they be able to? Because I know, like, in St. Pete, along Coffee Pot Bayou, everyone's locked because they don't want people stealing the stuff. They have lots of things they keep out there.
Well, we're also only talking about like a 3-foot wall, so you
Oh,
could,
they
you could
could
you
jump
could easily,
over.
even though I'm not that good at jumping
Got it.
fences, but I could even get over a 3-foot wall.
Have you seen gates like that in person? Have you seen them and experienced what they're like, or have y'all done those before?
I was gonna say I have at marinas, but that's not in a flood setting. I guess I haven't personally. I'm sure there's been floodgate systems that I've been part of. I haven't designed one with the floodgate before, but it's definitely possible, feasible. It's not that out of the ordinary.
All right, and then where you have the narrow right-of-way, it looks like it would be very difficult to put an earth berm in some of those places. I mean, in some, it's some, the road configuration, the right-of-way seems like it's going to dictate what you can do there.
Right, unless
partly,
you go
right?
further into the water, and then I guess that becomes more of a permitting issue if you're going to be allowed to fill in any submerged lands.
Yeah, talk about impacting mangroves then, right?
Well, that would be a major impact on them.
Yeah.
But
I have one more question on the gates, sorry. 'Cause
No,
I'm just trying to conceptualize what that will look like. When there is a higher tide and, those gates are closing, that would then prohibit a homeowner to access that private dock. So then they're limited as to when they can actually get out on their dock and what have you. How often how many times a year do you anticipate that those gates would be closed to the point where somebody wouldn't be able to access their dock and their boat?
Right, I mean, I do know that there's regular flooding on Wickham Bayou. I guess to get up to the bottom of the gates, I mean, the bottom of the wall, that probably could happen several times a year, I think.
Okay, thank you.
But as he said, if you do the T-wall, it's only 3 feet high. So even though the gate won't open, you could climb over
Hop right over.
the wall, right?
Sure, I guess. Who's
Yeah.
gonna put the cooler over that 3-foot wall?
He is. Call him up.
I appreciate that. People buy their homes with water access for the ability to access the water. So I'm just,
Right.
I'm kind of reaching at this concept maybe a little bit differently, but I'm just trying to understand what all the options are, but then also what all the the things that may come up where I'm kind of thinking, I would be frustrated if this is what was happening, because it's not what I signed up for. Having said that, I would want my home to not be flooded as
Right.
well. So, taking both sides of it. But thank
Sure,
you.
absolutely, good questions. All right, so we can, Johnny, we can move on to the next slide. Oh, this was just a alternatives and disadvantages slide. A few of them I have already mentioned for each one, so we listed in our report the alternatives and advantages and disadvantages for each of the systems. I talked about the concrete T-wall being able to be having and the berm to be able to have future adaptation to be increased in height. The earth berm being more aesthetically pleasing. The hybrid system taking advantage of the right-of-way widths for both earth berm and T-wall systems. Some, I guess, disadvantages that also is the impacts to mangroves, to the earth berm option, and also the blocking the views, like the T-wall being maybe less aesthetically pleasing to residents. So those are some of the, and then also the all the options would have some impact on the drainage of the roadway that have to be improved, and also the power lines that are along the road have to be relocated. So there's different challenges to each one.
In the description of the disadvantages for the road raising alternative, you say, quote, swabs leading to outlets into Bayou. What does that mean?
Under the disadvantages?
I don't know, swab, the only thing I know is, avast your swabs, arg. I don't know what a swab is, and I guess I don't know what kind of
I'm trying to see
drainage
where,
that means.
what it is.
Where are you
up there.
reading?
Under road raising disadvantages?
Yes,
Which one? Berm?
I can't see it from here, so I can't tell you, but under raising the road,
Oh, raising the road.
Yeah, I don't see that.
It says modified to proper slope. Acquisition.
Are you talking about this figure that slide we're on right now?
perhaps you could just discuss how you drain
see it
each
on
of the three alternatives from a major storm into the bayou.
Right,
What
so
the
the,
differences are between draining each of the three.
right, so the T-wall and the earth berm are be similar, that there would be openings through the T-wall system and the earth berm that would there'd be pipes through them and with backflow preventers, so that would allow the water would only be able to go out after the flood waters went down, so that we wouldn't. So as flooding came in, it wouldn't go through the system and through the walls and just flood the road. So you need the positive drainage to go back out to the bayou. The road. There would be, for the road raising, there would probably be a swale that would be installed, and the water we would try to capture the water there. But in general, just like the road now, it would be sloped down the water sloped down into the bayou as well.
Perhaps I misread it, and the word is swales.
That's very possible, yes.
How does a swale work? Because I have this image of, berm and swale. How does a swale work
Yeah, I think this,
when you've got a raised road?
Right, so the swale would be on the inside of the, on the home side of the road, and between people's driveways and between roads, it would just be could be a grass depression that the water just comes in there and fills up, and then it would be connected to a system. We would go underneath roads with culverts, pipes, and then be directed to wherever you want it to.
Okay, so the swale collects water, which then goes to a culvert system under
Yes.
the road. All right, okay, thank you.
No problem.
So
Johnny?
if there's water that gets trapped on the residential side, just as a result of the weather event where there's a lot of rain, are there going to be pumps at all to redirect water that gets trapped and stays in place in between the swale and the homes?
Right, so this, part of this project, we don't have any plans for installing pumps in the system. I'm not sure if the city ever used pumps.
No, but the system would be designed so that the swales wouldn't, water wouldn't get trapped. It would drain down the swales into the collection system, as he's explaining, and culverts would go underneath berms at the right low points where we can install check valves so that the water can only go out, but it can't come back in.
Question. I just want to point out it's 6:55 and we had allocated a half an hour and we're at 45-minute mark, so
Okay.
we're getting close to that, so.
Sorry, we'll
No, I mean, it's good to have these conversations.
Sure,
I just want to make sure that we all know we're going to be here pretty late tonight, so.
Sure. This is the a cost estimate slide that we wanted to share with you. Some of the ranges of the costs that we have for at the conceptual level, and so for the alternative one, concrete T-wall, just for the T-wall system all around the bayou, we're looking at between $10 million to $15 million. Alternative two, the road raising, that's the most expensive of the options. We're looking at like 11.6 to 18.1 million is the range. Alternative three, the earth berm, looking at a range of about 5 million to 7.5 million. So that's the lowest cost option. And then the hybrid option is the cross between the earth berm and the T-wall. So it's between those costs, and that we came up with 7.3 to 11.4 million. And then the part of each one of those that is the gate that needs to protect the canals in the southeast corner. And so right now we have estimated the barge gate, which is a very expensive structure, and that's anywhere between 23 and 41 million. But that's why we do need to still look into maybe the possibility of combining that slide gate alternative with maybe replacing the bridge there to the south. I mean, that might be, we're going to look at that option and make sure we include that in our final report.
So my view when I looked at this earlier is the costs aren't that much different, and I don't really care. My view would be do the project that works the best and that, addresses all the issues.
Sure.
Because $1 million, I mean, it's $1 million here or there. I mean, but really in the long term, and there's a lot of money out there. This
Sure.
document that was sent out, I guess you sent this out about all the funding, was just wonderful. It really was informative and so clear. So there's a lot of money out there. And so I think that for the city and for the future of the city, if this really works, then we can use it in other places. That would be my priority.
Sure.
Look at what works best and addresses all the issues.
Are we going to talk about funding, grant availability, et cetera, at all?
Johnny's going to get on that.
Yep.
Okay,
Next.
there it is. All right.
Yep, perfect segue. So Johnny,
perfect.
you're up.
Yes, I'll perfect segue for sure. Just want to be clear, we're good for me to
That's one.
spend a little bit of time on these slides. We only have like 4 more left, but
I think if we can click through them pretty quickly, that would be best.
all right, I'll try my best to get through them quickly. So first caveat or first disclaimer is that this is not a comprehensive overview of all the potential funding streams at the state and federal level, but we just wanted to highlight a few things that we think would be good for discussion during this meeting. So First one, just getting a snapshot of the current federal funding landscape. And this is in relation to the bipartisan infrastructure law that was recently enacted. It gives about $1.2 trillion of commitment to infrastructure over the next 5 years. Some of this has already been dispersed through competitive grants, formula grants, direct allocations to federal agencies like the Army Corps and especially the DOT. The biggest pot, as you can see right here, is for transportation. And I know Paul alluded to this potentially as taking different segments or components of the project and looking for different funding streams, such as those that are related to roads and bridges. There are some programs under the bipartisan infrastructure law that could be potentially something that we can look into to fund those components of the projects. There was one that was administered by DOT, US DOT, which is called the RAISE grant program, but unfortunately that's closed now. However, under this law, DOT is also going to be administering a program that should be coming out soonish called the PROTECT program. So that's promoting resilient operations for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation. PROTECT. It's a mouthful, but basically that looks at transportation infrastructure related projects, especially those that are touch coastal infrastructure and regions that can have a component with natural systems and infrastructure. Surface transportation assets are eligible for awards, as are bridges, et cetera. And especially those that focus on resilience in the face of natural disasters and sea level rise. So basically, Tarpon Springs, Whitcomb Bayou, storm surge, sea level rise, et cetera, could be a potential fit for some of the transportation elements of this project. However, there's not a lot of guidance on this yet, and the Notice of Funding Opportunity hasn't been released at this point. Here are some other categories of projects that could be funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law as well. All right, so I'm just going to quickly dive over to the state funding landscape. The biggest elephant in the room right now is the Resilient Florida program. So that is a mixture of different federal funding sources that have been given to the state, such as ARPA funds. I think there may be some CDBG, some HUD funds mixed up in there as well. But basically, through this program, and we're going into the second year of it now, and it's administered by the Florida DEP. It is for providing grants in planning and implementation, so for construction of these projects, for things that deal with flooding and sea level rise throughout the state. They allocated about $20 million to planning last year, and $100 million will be authorized for projects during this year. And as I said, some ARPA funds, some unused COVID funds, et cetera, were mixed up in that. One of the key things for this, or two of the key elements for this, is that these funds have to be encumbered by 2024. This is currently a program that's being administered under the current administration for the state. So we expect that it may last beyond that because it's a very popular program, but for right now, it's tied to this current administration. Another key component of this is that a vulnerability assessment has to be done first to access more of that funding, especially for implementation. And I know that's something that Tarpon Springs is getting underway right now. But if we, for example, look to apply for something in early 2023, then that should fit well with the period that this needs to be encumbered for. There is also a related program, also administered by the DEP, which is the Florida Resilient Coastlines program. This has a little bit more emphasis on natural systems, nature-based solutions, and infrastructure, such as living shorelines, a little bit further away from the hard infrastructure of Resilient Florida. All right, so current funding landscape. What we tried to do here was look at a few of the federal programs and also Resilient Florida, look at some of the components of the Whitcomb Bio project. Again, we're going to refine this over time, or the city is going to refine this over time, especially around that hybrid, potentially around that hybrid alternative. But as things stand now, we wanted to line this up just to give you a snapshot of how this project seems to be aligning with some potential funding sources. So at the federal level, the FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program seems a really good fit for this project. The caveat here is that there needs to be a federal presidential declaration of disaster for that funding stream to be opened up. Currently, there isn't one. Usually these are tied to things like hurricanes, but the pandemic, COVID also was, I guess you can say, an exception that allowed HMGP funding to be opened up. The good thing about HMGP, and I'm going to contrast this with BRIC in a second, is that there's a lot more, and this actually may be changing, but as it currently stands, there's a lot more authority at the state level to determine, and actually at the county level first in terms of prioritization, but ultimately at the state level to determine which projects are recommended for funding. I'll quickly switch over to BRIC, which is another FEMA administered program, which stands for the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program. This has been the new shiny object over the last 2 years. This is the second year of this program. We think some elements of this project align really well with BRIC, especially the living shoreline components, nature-based solutions. About 80% of BRIC funded projects in its the first year cycle had a pretty robust natural system, nature-based solutions component. So one of the things that we do think could be potentially disadvantaged for this is that risk reduction is a high scoring component. So what are you protecting to? And as we said, this project is looking at the 10-year flood level. 10-year flood event. Most of successfully funded BRIC projects do have that deal with flooding, have been looking at the 100-year or more. Again, feasibility for this area to go to that level when we're looking at cost effectiveness, and we're also looking at how the bayou is used and enjoyed. It probably is not a good fit, the best fit for BRIC. In addition, BRIC is really, really, really competitive. So, for example, in the first year of this program last year, there were over $4 billion in applications, and about $1 billion were funded. Hundreds of applications, and only 22 projects were funded nationwide under this. So, BRIC is a good program, but it's very competitive, and also we think the level that we're looking to protect may not be very competitive. In addition, BRIC scores very highly on disadvantaged communities receiving some of those benefits. There's also, President Biden has signed something into law now, which is called the Justice 40 program, which says that, I believe it is 40% of overall benefits from federal spending into things like such as grants like this have to be conveyed to disadvantaged communities. And there's a census tract that they use for that, pertains to BRIC as well. And unfortunately, the project area, that Whitcomb Bayou falls into that census tract is outside of the disadvantaged community. However, there is one right next to it immediately to the east. We could, we've actually had quite a bit of success with BRIC in its 2 years. Actually, of those 22 projects, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it was about 13% were Arcadis clients. So we've been pretty successful with BRIC so far. However, we could really tell a good story of how it could benefit one of the receiving areas surrounding it, that are disadvantaged communities, but just being upfront that these are potential pitfalls when looking for brick, the competitiveness of it, that we're not protecting to a very high level, and then also, unfortunately, the bayou itself does not fall into one of the census tracts that will be counted as disadvantage. HMGP and brick both require a benefit cost analysis, so that is to show that the benefits of the project, so that looks at damages reductions, that looks at environmental benefits, socioeconomic benefits, et cetera, outweigh the costs, and the ratio of benefits to costs needs to be above 1. And then there is a methodology, benefit cost analysis methodology that's prescribed by FEMA, that you input all the benefits and the costs to get that cost-effective score. You have to have a 1 to be eligible. We've done some
Johnny, if you don't mind, I'm gonna cut you off because we're getting
Sure.
way over time and we're getting way
sure.
too into the details. So if you could
All right,
wrap
so
up,
I'll-
that would be great.
Yes, I'll quickly go for it. Resilient Florida, we think this is a really good program for this project, but that vulnerability assessment needs to be completed first. So I think this is actually the last slide. So we think there are a few recommendations that we can make here for the city. The first thing is that vulnerability assessment needs to be completed because that's going to open up more of that state funding. There's a high success rate so far in terms of applicants. The state is flush with money for this program. There's a good possibility that you will receive some level of funding through that once that is completed. Again, brick, probably not the best fit for this fall cycle. However, I mean, the city could put forward an application. One thing that we would flag is that brick and HMGP applications are really, really similar. So say you did an application for a brick, for the brick cycle, even going into it knowing that there's some likelihood of not being as competitive as possible, that can also be translated to an HMGP application. Unfortunately, though, we have to wait for a disaster. The good thing, or bad thing, depending on how you look on it, is that we live in Florida. It is a pretty good possibility that maybe even as early as the summer that we're in, if there is just takes one, if there's a hurricane, that could open up some HMGP.
Let's hope not.
Opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay, that a declaration also could open up HUD funding in the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, and disaster reduction, and also mitigation grant programs. So actually waiting for a disaster to happen is potentially good, but we need to be ready for that in terms of refining these projects and these alternatives that we're going to do. So when that happens, we're ready for that. To plug into those applications. Another FEMA program, very quickly, is the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program. Typically, this looks at individual structure and property mitigation. So we're talking about buying out homes, elevating homes, et cetera. However, there is a component for community flood mitigation projects. So something like this. One of the things we're doing something similar we're helping out the city of St. Pete, one of their very vulnerable neighborhoods, Shore Acres, with FMA assistance. But in that community, we're looking more at the individual property level as opposed to the community flood mitigation program. One problem for this project is if we looked at homes first or structures first, then that would remove more remove these homes out of the floodplain, and then also affect that whole benefit cost ratio because we will be protecting less, in other words. But we do think that FMA could be a good source for this upcoming federal funding cycle, which is in the fall, if we're looking at a community level program, which we can probably put this under as well. So a few other broader recommendations for these programs. Again, at the state level, finish that vulnerability assessment, continue to evaluate these federal funding sources, potentially be ready for break, but with HMGP and CDBG in mind should a disaster hit. Assess FMA's applicability to this project for the community flood mitigation projects that are eligible. It's helpful, again, to maybe advance design and refinement of the selected alternative when we get to that. So when these disasters hit, we can plug those in and be ready to go. And then also the county is obviously a very key partner, not just from funding, but for advancing this project in general. And then continue to track these funding sources, everything that I listed here on this page, but also some of those bipartisan infrastructure law funding that we should be expecting some guidance about, especially those who deal with transportation. So in the interest of time, sped through that, and I think that is about all
Johnny,
that we have for funding.
how,
Yes.
how close are we to finishing the vulnerability assessment?
We are not involved. That's a question for the city. I believe it may have just kicked off. Is that correct, Bob?
Yeah, we just got an award from the state, what, about 2 months ago, even less. So we've been waiting for this for some time. We've got our consultant ready to go, so he's just finalizing his scope that he's already written, and we can get started.
And what's your estimate for when it'll be finished?
Yeah, I think he needs to redo his timeline now that we're starting, so I don't have an answer for you now, but we can follow up.
Since what we've heard is that unless that's finished, we're not eligible for a lot of things.
Yes, I would assume at least 6 months to do that.
6 months.
Do I understand correctly that the federal granting programs like BRIC and HMGP do not require the vulnerability assessment, but the state programs like Resilient Florida do? Is that a fair statement?
That is that's a fair statement. However, the more pieces that you have in place already will make your federal applications more competitive, such as a VA, yes.
I want to
At the
thank
state
you.
level, you need that for advancing any of that FDEP funding, yes.
Johnny, I want to thank you for the most thorough evaluation and description of federal and state funding I've ever seen.
In 3 minutes.
Truly excellent.
This document is,
Yeah, it's great. Looking in the appendix on the benefit cost analyses, it looks like the berm comes in at 0.87, the road at 0.72, and the T-wall at 0.75. None of them are greater than 1.0. Is that a problem?
Right. No, it's not a problem. So we don't have all the data that we would have put into an actual benefit cost analysis. This is something that we discussed before. In the interest of time, to make a long story short, there are different ways that we can get that to 1, and we're pretty confident we can do so, especially for the berm and a hybrid option. Well, all of them. The transportation one, the strict road raising might be a little bit more challenging, but we don't anticipate getting to a ratio of 1 or above being an issue.
Any other questions? I'd like to say that, we're not gonna give a recommendation of which particular one to the BOC. This was just for our information to understand the process, because I don't feel comfortable doing that, as a board.
Let me just throw this out. They've taken the time to give us 2 presentations,
Mm-hmm.
and they've had a fairly sophisticated community outreach in the interim. Wouldn't it be appropriate for our committee to give our blessing to some aspect of this? I mean, it's pretty thorough stuff.
I'm not comfortable doing that.
I move, just for the sake of discussion, I move that we propose to the BOC that our recommendation is the raised berm. And as an alternative, if the raised berm is not feasible for any reason, including excess mangrove disruption, that a hybrid system is our second choice.
I guess I would like to know where each of these designs have been implemented in the past and what the success rates have been.
Well,
I
we
don't
need a
think that
second
I've
before we can
heard
have a
much.
discussion.
Right, okay.
Okay, hearing none, the motion fails. So I would like to just go ahead and thank Arcadis and team for presenting us with this. It's a lot of information that is extremely dense to get through, and we need to make some tough choices as a community. And I don't know that we have consensus on like what we would see as a choice that's like the best choice. I think that's for the BOC to decide. I will just say that in terms of the cost, What concerns me is the bridge and the barge construction, adding $40 million to a project and not understanding how many homes are going to be impacted, and cross-subsidization of everybody in the community paying for potentially, I don't know, 20, 40 homes are back there. I think that that's a real concern because that's a significant amount of money that adds to the project. And so I think that that needs to be really thoughtfully considered. So
I also think that, I mean, to make a decision about which version to take, I mean, I personally would have a lot of questions. I would like to know what the community thought and what preferences other people have raised
Well,
with
they
the
did
Bayou.
they provided that information at the outset, that with their outreach, they got 32% for the raised
Raised
berm.
berm.
And-
But I'd like to know, what were the reasons, and I think there's just, and I feel, it feels rushed that we have to move on, and we can't take our time to consider this in a thorough fashion to make a choice. That's sort of my view, and maybe next time we could review it and make a choice.
I don't think that the timeline allows for that.
Okay.
That's correct, and thank you for giving me a moment. I wanted to say two things. We weren't asking, we're just looking for your feedback today. We weren't asking for your preference or a vote or anything like that. And that we feel, I appreciate feedback from this committee very much. So thank you for that. And when we do present it to the board, we hope that some or all of you will attend and give your opinion as well. Dr. Robinson nodding, yes, he will be there. The second thing I wanted to say to Madam Chair, your point about the barge only protecting those certain homes. I want to give you an analogy. If you think of the T-wall with the doors, and somebody left the door open, and you had a flood event, that's akin to what we would be having if we didn't do anything by the bridge. It affects everyone because you're just leaving a way for the water to get in and flood the entire area. So it's not just protecting those that live on the canal, it's closing off a open door, if you will. And that's what the purpose of that is.
That makes sense. Thank you for that clarification. But I guess I'm still kind of wondering if there's another way to close that off that's less expensive, because, I mean, that's a lot.
I think I recall that in the description, in the written information, an alternative that preceded the floating contraption, was to require that everybody raise their seawalls. Is that, you didn't present that tonight, but is that considered unlikely to happen, or what do you think?
Yes, because of the magnitude of effort, it would require setting ordinances, and then you'd have to set grandfathered times, time zones,
Yeah.
time frames, that's the word I want.
You're being.
Pardon? They can't hear me? Okay, thanks. So anyway, it would be prohibitive to try to raise and require those without setting city ordinances to require seawalls to be raised, and then allowing grandfathering in of existing seawalls so that when they have to get replaced, they have to be raised to a certain level. I think it would be much more difficult to require private seawalls to be increased. You were yelling at me? Sorry. Sorry, Mark.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the presentation, the information. We're going to move on to the next item, which is the comprehensive plan workshop. And I think we have a presentation.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Excellent. Good job.
That was fascinating.
Oh, my.
Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.
I'm Catherine Hartley with Benish, formerly Tyndale Oliver. You may remember me from your February workshop. I see some familiar faces if you all came to the workshops that we had several months ago. we're here to move on to the next step in the process. I'm going to borrow it.
I already did this.
I've got just a little exercise for you to do this evening. There's a survey in your packet that you either have already taken and will turn in to the staff, or are they allowed to do it and bring it back to you, or do you want them to complete it tonight?
I think prefer tonight, prefer.
Yeah. So if you'll do that this evening and give it back, most importantly, it has to have your name on it because they are recording your answer as a vote, essentially, right? So make sure that your names are on the sheet when you give it back. I do want to just walk you through the information. When we were putting together this material, not only were we going through your existing comprehensive plan and all the data and analysis that's already out there, but also we were given a copy of your STAR framework, the matrix that you all put together. And as you know, the comprehensive plan is what controls your built environment in the city, right? And how you grow into your future, your desired future. And so in taking the built environment portions of the matrix that you all put together, that's what fed into a lot of the materials that you have in front of you tonight and what we're trying to frame your comprehensive plan update around sustainability. And a lot of the things that were important to you, at least what we read, were things like context-sensitive infill, walkability, bikeability, being compact, having access to transit, having access to shopping, jobs, and so on and so forth. And so I want to walk through some of this material with you. A lot of the things that were in the matrix, the STAR matrix, were data that you asked that be collected, and we've done a lot of that for you. If you look through the maps that you have in front of you, you've got two land use maps on the very first page. On the left-hand side is your city's future land use map. That's your vision for growth for the future. And of course, in Florida, the future is now, right? We're constantly growing. A lot of people are moving here. On the right-hand side of the page is what we did was we took the countywide land use map. And that's like a different set of controls. So when you want to make changes to your map, it has to be consistent with the countywide map. It goes through a hearing process with Fort Pinellas and so on and so forth. And we took a look at the opportunities on their map to say, okay, where have they already accommodated for growth in the city? And where are those places that we could make changes on your land use plan, in your land use plan, that wouldn't take extra effort as far as a public hearing. It's like a separate process. It's an easier process to go through. And so the area that's in darker green on that map is like the highest area where you could increase density if you wanted to. Not that you have to, if you wanted to. But we also took into account the coastal high hazard area, which under Florida law is the area that could be inundated by a Category 1 storm. So it's all about balance, right? Balancing your flood zones, balancing storm events, and so on and so forth. You are in a good position in that you accommodated your growth a long time ago, your anticipated growth. You didn't grow as fast as what the state estimates were. So you've got potable water availability, you have sewer availability. You've got land availability, strangely enough. I know I hear the term built out all the time in Pinellas County, but I keep joking, St. Pete said that about itself in like 1996, and look at St. Pete. You have some room to grow. So you don't have to make changes to your land use plan if you don't want to. The purpose of tonight's exercise and what I'm going to talk through with you is about choice, housing choice, shopping choice, that kind of thing. Are there changes you want to make your community more diverse, more compact, so on and so forth? The other good news about your community, and this is not true for a lot of places, is that you have very good connectivity. You've got a pretty good grid, even though you've got a lot of water to work around, right? You still have a walkable core, and you have very good sidewalk connectivity. And so the second set of maps on the transportation connections, all the red is where you currently have sidewalk connections. So we mapped your sidewalks and the gaps. By the way, all of these maps are available online, so you can zoom in a little bit better and see better. And as you zoom in, you can see those sidewalk gaps closer up. Everything is on the Connect Parkman site. And not only is it mapping your existing conditions, but it also we pulled data from other plans. So if there was a county facility planned or something by FDOT, whatever, it's also plugged into this map series, so you can see what is planned for the future, in some way, shape, or another. We also put together a safety map for you. You can see on the third maps, it's called Board C. So we had these actually at the engagement that we had a few weeks ago, giant boards around the room, so that's why they're labeled the way they are. Incidences of crashes, so pedestrian, vehicle, bicycle crashes. I'm going to try and go quickly. I know we're kind of on a time constraint here. Your exercise for tonight is, so if you take a look at this map, we broke down the city into chunks, right? A, B, C, D, and E, so that you could kind of take some stickers, and if there are places in the city where you want to see more of something or something new as far as infill development, you can tell us where those things are going to, where you would like to see those. And we may have to make adjustments to your comprehensive plan in order to accommodate those things. So we gave you some examples of some different housing and commercial types on this page. It's lots of pictures, I know.
Yeah.
And they're also on this page, so they're zoomed a little bit and you can see them a little better.
Can I ask you about the terminology?
You sure can.
Residential, the very first group of pictures says accessory dwelling unit. What
Right.
is an accessory dwelling unit in English?
So that is a granny flat. So if you have a single family house, for instance, and you want to put a little backyard cottage in the backyard, that's an accessory dwelling unit. It is accessory to your main dwelling.
Okay.
So
Why do you call a duplex a paired villa?
that is the
Call a fourplex a fourplex.
that's the public hearing term for duplex. So what I have found, working as a local government planner for most of my career, was that it's actually becoming a very popular development type right now, because you can put two houses on one single family lot. But the term duplex, for some reason, it has a stigma to it. And so
And fourplex does not?
you tell me, I don't know. So it's kind of it's a not very funny joke, but in any event, it's simply attached single family. I mean, if you want to get down to it, for building code purposes as well. Two houses stuck together is the same as a single family house according to the building code. You don't have to provide sprinklers, so it's cheaper to build. It's a 2-for-1 special, essentially, on a single family lot. But in any event, you do have to look at densities when you start allowing for more than one unit on what would essentially be a single-family lot. And those are numbers that, if you wanted to do that, we may have to adjust in your plan. Cottage courts, that is getting more and more popular, and you see them historically around the region and really all over the country. They're single-family houses on an oversized lot, usually around half an acre or so. 4, 5, 6, 7 little houses, and they face a little central green. It is a higher density product. I hate using the word product because it sounds like you're putting face cream. It's higher density housing that's still single family. It's not as scary to people, but the numbers are actually high when you just work it out on a per unit on a piece of dirt.
And is that more affordable housing like that?
I have done one affordable, so when I used to be the planning director for the city of Bradenton, and we did have an affordable housing developer come in and do a cottage court. It was mostly, the folks that were buying them were school board teachers. So they were on the higher end of the affordable housing spectrum. It was like 80% to 120% of the area median income, so $40,000 to $50,000 income, but still considered affordable for that purpose. And they did get some incentives from the city. But yes, so these are just, they're all different housing types that you may have to adjust your numbers for. And if there are places in the city where you think that stuff should go or could go, that's what the little exercise is for. So you tell me where that stuff should go. And the same thing for commercial.
Would a food truck qualify as a pop-up commercial?
It sure would.
Okay.
Yep.
And do you, when we put the stickers on,
Mm-hmm.
let's say if I want it downtown,
Right.
do I have to put it near where I want it or just put it
In the
that-
area.
In the area?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we
Within the
broke it.
red lines.
Right. So we broke it down because we'll know what you meant
Okay.
when we're looking at land. Yes.
I did one of these at the workshop and put my name on it. I don't want to vote twice, but I will if you want me to. Should I do it again?
Well, if you're participating now as a board member, then yes.
I think I was participating there as a board member, but
But you're on two boards, right? You're
No,
on.
it was the, it was, this,
We asked the city attorney about that,
yeah,
and you can participate as a member of each committee or board.
so I can do it again.
You can do it.
Thank you.
And technically, because you're a private citizen, you can go home and do it again.
Specifically.
Early and often,
a
we're going to
different
vote.
Your position
Probably.
as a member of
Probably.
this committee, though.
Right. Right.
Probably.
So you're voting as this
Vote
committee
often.
member tonight, as that steering committee. You were acting as that board that day. Technically.
Fine.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Technically
Happy
speaking.
to do it. You just can't compare what I do this time to what I did last time and go, look at that, she changed her
Can
mind.
feel free to change your answer. It's
I
okay.
thought about it after that meeting. I thought, oh, that could have worked too. And so now I have the chance, the redemption.
No judgment.
Thank
We are not going to be picking on you. They just need to record it for public record.
right.
I'm not going to pick on you either way, any which way. So in any event, corner stores, pop-up retail or whatever commercial, accessory commercial unit, that is something that's sort of trendy right now, especially in places like Portland, where you add a commercial use to the front of your home. Live work is a thing. That's a specific building type under the building code that has to be more residential square footage than commercial, and you literally live where you work, like that is your residence and you work there. But mixed use is a different thing. You have a business on top and then residential above. And then, of course, we have like a traditional conventional shopping center. Maybe you want more of that. And maybe there are numbers that we have to adjust in your plan to allow some more commercial infill. So that is your task tonight, is your
Okay, so
business that you're doing right now.
you gave me a lot of
Sure,
stickers.
you do not have to use all of them. You
Okay,
just
But if
have
I
them.
put something in one area,
Yes,
I don't have to put more than one. Like I want a lot of these, so I
you don't have to.
just,
Just
one
play
will
it by
do it.
ear.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
got it.
Let's clarify what packet we want you doing that in. Yeah, so if you could use your stickers in this packet, the big one, because you have the individual maps in them of each
We're
of
putting
the
them on this
little
map,
groups.
right?
We're putting them on the map that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
In this
But,
packet?
but in this packet, yes, ma'am, that packet.
This one.
The one with,
So we don't
the one
put
with
stickers
this
on
on the cover.
Of each.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm not putting them on here?
Not anymore.
Where do you want me to put
Okay,
them?
wait, we're putting the stickers
That's okay.
here. We're putting stickers here. Because
There, but on the map that's follow, so.
this is enlarged. I think so.
You have enough stickers, you can put them on there too.
I have some more questions before we get
I'm gonna put
going.
them on this one.
Okay,
But I like this map.
but I
Then
want to make
can
sure
give
everybody's
you
listening
this.
to the questions.
Yeah, I don't want to give you. Yeah, but I didn't print it out, right? Okay.
So our
I
stickers.
have enough you want me to put it here?
Yes, it's just, it's bigger.
It's bigger to put them
Oh,
on there.
I see.
Going on each of these, okay.
One page for each section.
Um,
Yes. Well, let's see.
Do I understand
I live?
correctly that
Yeah, yeah.
if you go
So
back to
this
the
is-
very first page,
Yeah.
I know where I
which
live.
is future land use vision, and you look at the map on the right,
Okay,
Yes.
now I just.
the areas in yellow and gold are lower density than other areas in blue.
So on the right-hand side, the blue is is like an overlay showing where your coastal high hazard area is. So maybe that's an area you want to plan around. The different colors, so the deeper the color, the more opportunity you have with less red tape is really what that's getting at. So the dark green area, you have an opportunity under the countywide map to increase your density locally without going through a whole lot of headache. That's really all that means.
The yellow area along North Florida Avenue, fairly wide open in terms of density, correct?
Oh, I'm doing the.
Where are you looking? I'm sorry.
I'm looking at Board A.
Right?
What are you,
Are you on the right hand or the left side of the page?
I'm on the right hand.
Okay, and you're looking, so if you're looking at,
yours is,
if it's white, that means there's headache.
And if it's yellow?
If it's yellow, you have a little bit of flexibility, but not a lot. The green is you have a lot of flexibility to increase your density. It doesn't mean that you can't. It just means that there's some red tape involved.
There you
But
go.
generally plan around the blue.
like this one?
No, these big
I'm not
ones.
seeing much green. I must be looking at the wrong map.
Yeah, let me show you.
there isn't that much green.
This
This is what we have to work with.
It'll be the green.
Definitely not building around Howard Park, right?
Right there.
That's green.
And that's
Okay.
where the county has planned, it's called, they have it listed as an activity center on their map. And so all this really means is that there's less red tape if you concentrate your growth in the color, in the green or the yellow. And blue means you might want to plan around that, but you don't have to.
Well, that's what I kind of was asking about this yellow area, which is North Florida Avenue. That's pretty close to the coast. That is not considered risky? It's
Accessory
higher
dwelling
elevation.
unit.
Okay,
Yep,
fair enough.
yep.
Add that to hospital.
So how long do we have to do this exercise?
1 minute.
I think you guys had a time certain is your problem tonight, right? You were supposed to be done by 8 o'clock?
Well, I think we were going to extend to at least 8:30 or potentially,
Okay.
I mean, at this point,
I'm here
9,
on your
because
dime.
that was a half an hour presentation that turned into an hour,
Yeah.
so.
You have, I mean, the most important thing is that the staff gets your answers back and they get your answers back with your name on them.
Okay.
Because you're acting as a group, but you can't act out as a group outside of the sunshine, right? So you aren't able to coordinate outside of this room. So we're kind of on an honor system here. But you do have a lot, I mean, I realize it is a lot of material for a short period of time. You also have a transportation exercise too, to tell us where there may be opportunities for crosswalks or bike lanes or things that aren't planned for. So it is a lot of stuff, and they also had a little survey for you to do too. It's a lot to do in just a few minutes. So if you want me to just walk you through what stuff means and then you have time to do it on your own, that may be better.
And
It's
if we
just-
pinky promise to bring it back tomorrow, we can't do that?
No, you can bring it back to
Okay.
us, but yeah, I want that pinky promise.
You're on the honor system.
I just want to be very thoughtful about this, and this is a lot.
It doesn't even have to be tomorrow
Okay.
necessarily. Let's say if we can get it back to us by next Friday. Because I gave it to you in advance, and I knew all of you were gonna read every word of what was in your packet.
No, because I have questions about that too, and I wasn't sure if we're going to get to that, because I did read your assignment, that state statute,
Uh-huh.
and I have questions and stuff.
Okay, well, see, that's why that's great. That's good. That's why we're here. So if you have questions about anything that was in your packet, if you have questions that you need to ask staff or the consultant to help you figure out how you're gonna fill out all of these exercises, that's why we're here. So we can get the packets later, but you're all pinky promising you're going to return them, and you're not gonna talk to each other about them outside of this room.
I don't know these people.
Oh,
Blinders. Okay, so I have another couple questions.
Yes.
So for is it possible when you're looking at adding features, legally, can you do it in an area but only on main thoroughfare roads?
Absolutely.
How do we communicate that with you?
You know what? It's to me, it's okay if you take a pen and write all over this. I mean, we let people do that at the workshop as well. So if you feel like you want to write stuff down on your little map and stuff, I mean, there was a front and back for people to be able to write. So if there's like you want to point to something and scribble on the page, I don't care as long as we get it back and we're able to record that, and then we know that it's you. That's all that.
Because I'm just thinking like out on the way to Sunset Beach, there used to be a grocery store where the elementary school is back in the day. That's how old school I am with Turpin. But y'all remember that?
What now?
Food Lion, where the elementary school used to be.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what I'm just thinking. Like, I wouldn't necessarily want a grocery store like 4 blocks into the neighborhood, but along that main thoroughfare, that might make sense to add.
If you want to take a pen and scribble all over it, that is okay with me.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Are there any commercial things that are like cute little coffee shops?
That was what the corner store was meant to imply. It could be any number of things, but a small retailer. So this little guy, it says corner store commercial on the back. I
Is
know
that
it's teeny
E?
tiny.
E in the
C, corner store commercial.
C. Okay. Because
And I'm returning to you this whole packet.
Right.
Got it.
Yep.
All 3 of them, the survey, the land use exercise, and the transportation exercise.
So back to the corner store, because I had that in the backup as I was trying to process.
Yep.
I think it was like little Manavis or produce stands was in the same category as like a gas station.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, those are like way different things. Like one is like not really putting an environmental impact in a neighborhood, like a fruit stand, and then another is putting like tanks in the ground that could be a environmental hazard.
Right.
So just write it out. Like
Feel
that's-
free to exclude what you want to.
Okay.
Yep.
Where's the pen?
Under transportation safety, looking at board C, if my arithmetic is correct, I counted 16 accidents or fatalities or incapacitating accidents along alternate 19. 5 along East Tarpon Avenue to the west of 19, 4 on Keystone Road, and about 8,265 on Highway 19.
Right.
What are the discussions regarding Highway 19 that led up to at this point? I mean,
Well,
are there discussions about, first of all, are these pedestrian injuries or predominantly motor vehicle to motor vehicle crashes?
I have that broken out data somewhere. They're all of the above. So bike ped, bicycle, pedestrian, and vehicle crashes. But we have that data separated out.
Okay.
And that can be made available to you. I may be able to look it up real quick if I keep losing my connection to the,
As,
my
you know,
network.
I've practiced medicine in 4 places along Highway 19 and in Pinellas and in Pasco counties.
Yeah.
And I have seen almost exclusively vehicle-to-vehicle crashes, or at least the patients from those. I haven't seen much in the way of vehicle to bicycle crashes and not much in the way of pedestrian. But if pedestrian and bicycle is an issue, have discussions about bridges or tunnels that allow people to safely cross Highway 19 been discussed? Is that even,
Here's a resident transportation
it being
plan.
discussed at all?
Caroline Lanford, certified transportation planner. The reason you as a physician did not see cyclists and pedestrians is because the morgue saw them.
Yeah, well, however, working in emergency departments, you would anticipate seeing some of those people, but yeah, they may have died.
The majority of the fatalities that have occurred in Tarpon Springs have been pedestrian.
So, are you saying that they are a significant number of, or a significant
They are a
percentage
disproportionate
these.
percentage of fatalities and serious injuries.
So that reinforces my question. Is there a discussion about a way over or under Highway 19 for pedestrians and bicycles?
Funny you should mention that. We are pursuing partnerships with Forward Pinellas and the Florida Department of Transportation. The Florida Department of Transportation is kicking off design for US 19 in our neck of the woods. They're starting construction to the south of us this year, supposedly. And so design's going to be moving forward, and we would like very much to partner with FDOT and Forward Pinellas to get a more, what we would call a safer facility than what we have now, one that accommodates transit users, because that's our main transit route. Pedestrians and cyclists, people who need to get places, just like all the rest of us. I do know that the latest design they did, they were supposed to be putting in pedestrian crossings every quarter of a mile. They didn't quite get there, but they did get to about a third of a mile.
So it's pedestrian crossings at the level of the highway?
Either over or under.
Over or under?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
So it's been in the plan for a long time, and it's going to see some momentum.
So there is one tunnel that I'm aware of, that's the one that goes along the Anclote. So are they talking about doing them in several locations so we have different routes under US 19?
Yes. So for the latest design that they did to the south of us, I believe those are all going to be, they being Florida Department of Transportation. They're underpasses.
Okay. Where approximately?
I know there's one at Republic Drive. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe there's 3 in the next segment that they're constructing.
That's awesome.
Good. Good deal.
Interestingly and sadly, your MPO director has been hit on his bicycle twice in Pinellas County in his career. So it's a very serious issue, and US 19 in particular. It's not unlike anywhere else in Florida, though. It's a deadly road, and it bisects your community, and it's also your major transit route, and you've got a lot of things that are in conflict there, and so the question for every community is, how do you balance the need to move people and goods with safety? And it's always going to be something you'll wrestle with. There's no quick fix. There's no pedestrian overpass. It's going to be the end all be all to your solution, the solution to your problem. But there are design things that you can do, and there's offering people options is one of the easiest things that you can do, and the options are being able to live and work within walking distance or biking distance and not having to get on that facility at all. It's made a huge difference in my own life, and I can only imagine in the lives of a lot of other people. Just being in the car and having quality time with your family is a big deal. All of those things are a big deal, and that speaks to sustainability in a big way. So those are just all things you're going to wrestle with, But the one thing that you can do, and this is not part of my scope, but it's something for you to keep in mind, there is a very obscure part of Florida statute that basically pushes FDOT to look more closely at your comprehensive plan and what you want for your future. If you put in an optional design element, it's like this one weird thing in statute, but it does make a difference, and they do have to pay a little bit more attention to what you want. But that is outside my scope of work, but it's something for you to think about as you move through the process and think more along the lines of what you want out of your state roads.
It's interesting that when you're in Europe, and I'll use Amsterdam as an example, it appears like total chaos with pedestrians and bicycles and trolleys and you name it.
Yep.
And what makes the difference there is that there's actual consequences for taking a life of a pedestrian or a cyclist. And I think that would change everything here if they implemented the same types of consequences.
They've also done excellent work with design since the 70s. I mean, the Netherlands didn't look much different than the United States back in the 70s, but they've just made huge strides in their infrastructure. It's amazing. If you go look at, video and photos back from the 70s, you would think you were in the United States, but it's incredible what they've done now.
Are we talking about the transportation stuff yet?
We can move on to the transportation stuff if you want to. It's a lot. I know it's a lot of material, and we're trying to get through stuff.
Well, I already did it. I printed out the thing.
Good. Okay.
Because I read the instructions.
Good.
But one of the issues I have from where I live is, so I live
Yeah, it's quite something.
west of the Yacht Club Bridge. And I like to ride my bicycle, but I don't, because to get to the bike trail is really scary.
Right.
And I know that in order to, they're trying to widen that road, and they put these stakes in people's yards, which is gonna make their houses next to the road or something. It's not gonna be much. So, I mean, the question is, to widen the road enough to put a bike trail in, I don't know how you do that. Like those giant houses along Spring Bayou, you're gonna take their land away?
It's about purchasing
so.
right away if it does not exist.
So is that what the city's gonna do, take the right of way away and widen the road?
Let me pop in here. I don't think that that's probably in our policy, but if you look at our, the plant, let's see, I think it's board, no. Where's our transportation? Oh, board B? Right? Yeah. So we've had plans for a community trail around the bayou for probably longer than I've been alive. And it just has never materialized because there's, in the area you're talking about, there's, Beckett Bridge, and it's narrow, and
Well, even the land that the yacht club owns where the parking lot, there's no sidewalk, there's nothing.
right.
And it's sidewalk, and then you have to cross the street, and then you have to cross the street, and
So I think what,
it's treacherous.
I
You
think-
can't ride in the street because it's too narrow.
not certainly not those streets. I think from my perspective would be to try and find alternative routes on lower capacity streets, more local streets where we could
There
have.
aren't any.
I mean, you do have what we call a pinch point there, so you'd kind of have to go around in some cases. And I feel you, but if you do look on this board B, if were we to have the proposed trails that we've been talking about for a long time, you would have a way to do that.
Good, yeah.
So it's about prioritizing, and really one of the focuses that the MPO and FDOT have been looking on is this concept of redundancies and having alternate routes so that people can, for instance, as we were discussing US 19, I don't want really anybody riding their bike on US 19 as it is right now. So if we could have parallel routes that were safe, maybe they would only have to access 19 for a short little bit to get where they're going.
But where I'm talking about, people on bicycles are always riding on that because it's the only way.
It's the only way.
From the west to get to the trail. And
I'm-
everyone's trying to get to the trail. So it's a major bike route, but when they go over the bridge, well, eventually, in 10 years, maybe they'll fix the bridge?
Well, and maybe when they fix the bridge, they'll put a bike lane on
Well,
it.
they're supposed to.
They're definitely going to be sidewalks on it, from what I understand. So, yeah, I mean that area truly is a pinch point, and it's about priorities. so.
There's no way around.
I mean, you could go all the way around, you could, but that's putting the burden on the cyclist who is, using pedal power, using their breakfast for fuel
Yeah, that's.
to go the further distance, so.
Can I ask a question on the transportation maps?
Sure.
Okay, so, I have two questions. One, is there are areas where the verbiage is so big that it's hard to know if there's a connecting sidewalk. So if I go online, does this map look exactly the same? 'Cause
Yeah,
there's this-
I mean, you can zoom in, it's really, it's too large of an area trying to convey too much information. I'll tell you, you can see a little bit better when you zoom in on your screen where there's sidewalks on only one side. That's a little bit easier to see.
Okay,
It's the exact same map.
it's the exact same map, okay. So
But
that-
you can
that's-
see a little bit better if you zoom
That's
in.
helpful, and I'm speaking specifically because there's that area right around, similar to where you're speaking of, where the walking path along the bayou ends,
Right.
and then there's no connection on that side of the street, and there's no crosswalk to cross the street over, or what have you. So, but that will be misidentified from where it says Craig Park.
Yes.
Oh,
Wow.
actually, it will not, because Craig Park is that's a little bit further different, down the road.
That's that green.
So,
bit.
okay, so then my second question to that is, how do I know, I don't use much of the transit that is available. How do I know at this point where there is a connection? Is it?
Well, it's so limited that I can tell you by heart.
If I may interrupt,
Lines are on.
we
here.
need a motion to extend the meeting past 8 o'clock.
Motion to extend the meeting past
Second.
8 o'clock.
All in favor? Aye.
So we have three main regular service transit routes in Tarpon Springs.
They're in this packet.
It's in there.
It's in there?
So-
Okay.
So I see your transit.
So the dark,
So,
blue.
yeah, just,
blue.
but
Okay.
to clarify, no,
No, I see that. What I think I don't understand is, are you asking, so we have the bus system, are we talking the Jolly Trolley, are we talking, so.
Yeah,
and-
we're talking
and with
all of that.
those, Whatever, okay, so we're basically asking, hypothetical situation, should there be connection between the dark blue that gets you to Howard Park? Is that theoretically what you're asking of this exercise?
Right. Are there connections that aren't made, whether it's bike, ped, or transit? And it doesn't have to be a bus, like a lot of communities are doing micro transit, right? Like St. Pete Beach, they've got their little golf cart situation, that was their option. Instead of having the bus go down to Pass Grill anymore, they wanted to do a local solution. So it does not have to be a giant bus, it can be so many different things. Just let your imagination go crazy.
Okay, so
That's-
it's theoretically, if I want to get off of some sort of public transit at, let's just say, the Chamber of Commerce, but I want to get to Howard Park, then I'm saying to myself, do I just put a big old one? Like right in the center? Do I draw an arrow? How do I depict kind of, again, I can write on the back and I know that.
Yeah.
But it says number on the map where connections for transit are needed. I don't necessarily know.
It's
know
okay,
that.
you know what, just go crazy. If you want to draw on it, fine. If you want to write it out in sentences, fine. There's like space on the back for you to do that. We will be able to record your answer and understand what you're saying.
So as long as you understand
Don't feel
what-
limited by the medium.
And
Is
since
that-
you're gonna be identifying yourself, if we don't understand it, we can call you to follow up.
Thank you.
Caroline, can you expound on that dash green line on Board B, this proposed community trail? So who would be doing that? Us?
Yeah, you would. No, yes, I mean ostensibly that it is, it's been in the long-range plan that Forward Pinellas, our metropolitan planning organization, has for a very long time. it's been in the plan.
Would it be like a Pinellas Trail looking type of thing with a walking or biking or something like that?
Yeah, when they designate it as a community trail, usually it means, hey, community, you need to pay for this. I can say in the city of Dunedin, they have a community trail, which is actually just a really wide sidewalk. But you do feel okay biking on it, and, two people can actually pass each other walking and be comfortable.
St. Pete has that too, along Coffee Pot.
So it can
wide thing.
take any kind of.
We
there's
really need those
North
east-west.
Shore Park.
East-west connections, for
Yeah.
sure.
And
Getting
if it's
to the
not
trail.
Riverside, sorry, Dr. Mickett, at least on Mears and Klosterman and.
Yeah, I think the Mears Trail is another one that has been in the long range transportation plan and our comprehensive plan for a very long time.
At least 10 years, right?
Could
I'm
you
thinking
speak
at
to
least
this
20.
Canoe trail? I mean, there's no trail.
Well, no, they are just they're designated blue ways. The
Okay.
state does that. They designate certain routes as blue ways.
Okay. I mean, I kayak there. There's nothing, you just kayak.
Caroline, so this one here that has all the different boards on it, this one we don't write anything on. This is just for us, right?
It's really more informational, but if you have something to write, Ms. Sanger,
Oh,
I will
I've
be
got
happy
plenty
to
of
take
room
it
to
wherever
write.
you'd like to give it to us.
Yeah, but this one, it's this survey and the transportation one and the infill.
And the stickers.
Yeah, okay,
Yes,
thank you.
That's it.
And I can't bring this back tomorrow, it'll be next week.
That's fine. I'm giving you up until next Friday.
You got it.
All right.
I just looked at the local weather stem site, which is the fire department, and the heat index right now at 8 o'clock at night is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. The projection for the future in this congressional district is that within the time frame of a mortgage, a 30 standard mortgage taken out tomorrow, 3 months out of the year, every single day will have a heat index of 105 or higher. I think it's lovely that we're talking about bike lanes, and I think it's lovely that we're talking about increased locations where people can catch a bus, but how involved is the city arborist and plans for shade, plans for water features, for hydration features along these proposed trails? You look at any place where people catch a bus in the city, there's no shade anywhere around those places.
And we have a board for that.
Okay, great.
Where is that heat map? Is
This
there-
page. Okay, so board I is your heat island map and also your shade map. And speaking of heat, on my way here today, crossing the bridge, the ambient temperature reading on my car said 100 degrees. That's not what it feels like. That's just what it was driving over here. It's, we're going to keep experiencing that, and it's going to keep, you treat heat events the same way you treat a storm event. It's still something that your community has to deal with one way or another. And so you've got your little heat sensitivity map down here on the bottom. So the pinker it is, the darker the pink, the hotter it is. Those are your hot spots. Obviously, US 19 and Alt 19 are hot spots. So are your schools,
The schools,
interestingly.
that was so surprising.
Right? That's
Because of the asphalt.
jumps out on you. Yeah,
No,
and
so
roof,
Those are
your roofs.
those are county schools, so I
Right.
mean, the city would have to have a partnership, a collaboration with the county to do those plannings.
You bet.
Because you look at Sunset Hills, Tarpon Elementary, even St. Pete College. you know.
Right, and so you can look at the top map, the green. That's your tree canopy.
It's horrible.
Right? It's not it's not that great. It's not that bad either compared to a lot of places. But there are things that you can do programmatically, and this is something I did as the planning director in Bradenton. We partnered with the Arbor Day Foundation and did a tree giveaway. So we would collect money from developers with a tree permit. We took that money. We partnered with the Arbor Day Foundation. And we did the tree give, and we did that every year. And so we got hundreds of trees planted. And the great thing is that it's also a flood control thing, right? So the average shade tree can deal with 100 gallons of water a day. A live oak tree, it's double that.
Right.
And so it also helps with your flooding. It's nature's air conditioning. There's so many benefits to it. And there's things that you can do as a community to help with that.
They do tree giveaways during Arbor Day, and then they also, during Touch a Truck, they do tree giveaways several times a year. They
Right.
do them in the community.
Right.
But the trees are really little.
Including mangroves. Mine,
Because I have them and they're small.
They start that way, they sure do.
I know, but my point is, they're not gonna give shade for quite a while.
It's better than nothing.
But
It's
my-
got to start somewhere, right? Like,
Exactly.
the cool thing about the Arbor Days website is that when you do the tree selection, it will look at, if you put in your address, it looks at your house, it looks at the soil condition, the climate condition, and all that, and the side of the house that it's on, and tells you which species to plant and on what side of your house. It's really cool. Like, it's a cool tool.
The red maple tree at the end of the building, at the east end of the building, it's about 30 feet tall now. That was planted not that many years ago, and it was a stick from an Arbor Day giveaway thing. It was
That's awesome.
a stick, and now it's a huge, beautiful red maple that you can see outside the
Right.
second story. Yeah, I mean, you gotta start somewhere.
Okay, I
Yes,
want to
but
get us,
is there a coordination of trees, hydration, projected pathways?
That I can't tell you. I don't know.
I think that's part of the plan that just got approved for, correct? An arbor plan, or looking at a
Tree inventory.
Tree
yes,
inventory, thank you.
Urban management
Tree
plan.
inventory, okay, that's.
Sorry, my
that-
words
Sh-
too
And
many.
Shannon mentioned that at our task force meeting, but that has begun?
Well, we just were awarded a grant, so.
Okay, yay, great.
So you're
thank
doing
you.
And
like a little
remember
urban
when
forestry
we
master
met-
plan type
When we
goals.
met with the city staff, you weren't there, Dory, but I had asked about trees on the sponge docks, because there aren't any.
No.
And the arborist and the woman from Parks talked about their investigation into planting trees and creating this whole underground for them, that they could maybe plant trees at the sponge dock. It's a whole new way of creating like irrigation and plants and places where there's no dirt, basically.
Sylvan,
that's
the
exciting.
Silva cells.
Silva, it is.
That's
Yeah.
very exciting, because down at the sponge docks, there's no trees.
Yeah.
And that's where most tourists go, and it's hot.
There's more now than there were.
Wow.
I mean, there was
But-
nothing. Now
I
at least
know,
there's
but
some shade.
we need to find alternative ways.
Okay, so I want to bring us back so that we can get wrapped up this evening. So I'm gonna explain what I think we need to be doing, and then if you could correct any issues. Okay, my understanding is this is our tool of like all of the different maps and data points that we would use to do the 3 activities. For the 3 activities, we've got looking at this infill exercise in which we use the stickers, right? And then we also can describe where we would like to see various things going in the city. We also have our transportation exercise where you would want us to explain where we would expand both walking, biking, and transit options for the city. And then we have this comprehensive plan questionnaire to fill out.
Correct.
And we need to get all of these back to you by next Friday.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right.
If we could have Robin, just if you could collect them since you have her contact information, and then we could just get it from you.
And we can write on this one too if we want to.
You can
Build that one out.
and you can, if you want to physically bring them back, that's great. If you want to scan them and email them to Robin.
We can do so many
fill up
options.
Robin's inbox,
Beautiful.
you know.
What, can I ask one more question? just so I can make sure
Absolutely.
that this
Sure.
tasked correctly. We are taking into consideration the things such as the density in regard to, it's easier to get that approved if it's in a green?
You don't have to. It's literally just a red tape issue. It's a different route
Okay.
to
so-
get a land use change. Don't worry
so
about
I'm
it.
not necessarily thinking that I want something there, but there's a good chance it's not gonna happen because it's in the area. I don't have to worry.
You don't have to worry about that. It was to highlight the intergovernmental coordination that has happened between the city and Forward Pinellas to date, because you do have those 2 maps to work within,
Okay.
but that doesn't mean you cannot change them.
Okay.
You can.
That helps.
And I realize it is a lot of data, and it is hard to see on paper. So feel free to go on to the Connect Tarpon site and get in and zoom in, look more closely at things. They still have access to the wiki maps,
Or
right,
ride your bike
too, that they can zoom in on, or no?
Gave my bike away. I don't know.
From the exercise, can they get into the survey that way, or is it closed?
No, that's like the.
Okay.
was just so over it. And like I said, I'm
Oh,
still
okay.
getting down
Are we
to
supposed to
Okay.
put stickers where there are things like
I'd like
golf courses, et cetera?
I guess.
You can put stickers wherever you
You can
want.
put them wherever you want. You just
Get
got
crazy.
permission.
It's our wish list.
Redevelopment of
Wherever
golf
you
courses
want.
is a
We're in
big deal right
I
now.
heard it, I
Yeah.
just want to be sure that makes
Okay.
Redevelopment of golf courses is a big deal in Florida right now. It's happening all over the place. And
Innisbrook.
Can you explain that just a little bit?
so literally taking a golf course and turning it into something other than a golf course, residential, commercial, whatever. It is happening all over because it's not a productive use of land. People aren't playing like they used to.
Water.
They're not making money. They're
Lots of
toxic.
pesticides.
You know, there's a lot of reason
Water.
to do them. Right, they're very water intensive, chemical intensive, and they're just not, a lot of places, a lot of developers held on to that land as ownership. Like it was a benefit to a community with an HOA and all that, but when you don't have the money to support it anymore, they turn it into something more productive, and it's happening all over the place,
Yes.
so.
You have any stats on the golf course that's in Tarpon?
I don't.
I mean, I'm just wondering, like,
Our
is
municipal
it
course?
legitimate to have a wish list for what could be done with that land, or is it
From a land use
lucrative
perspective-
golf course at this point?
From a land use perspective, if you're just putting something on a map and you say if it's something that's designated a park today or something else on that map and you want it to be something else later, there's nothing wrong with you doing that in this exercise. I wouldn't worry about it.
Sorry, we're having
What is
sidebar
the sidebar over
conversations.
here? Yeah.
I like that.
Okay. Next question. So we're done with this. What is like the next step, and how else are we engaging with the comp plan update? Like, just kind of thinking down the road.
Well, as far as our contract was concerned, we were going to, after this, going to get into really start going through your policies and recommending changes. But Renee, the planning director, wanted us to do another round of engagement after this. What that looks like right now, we need to explore that with the staff. We're going to have to amend our contract and add another round in. So as of right now, I don't have a clear answer for you. So the contract's going to be extended, another round of engagement added, and then after that, we're going to really get into the nuts and bolts of editing your policies.
Catherine, I think our idea was that the next time we would come to you, it would be with a strike-through underlined document, which is taking our existing goals, objectives, strategies, and policies, and the changes that we're making old to new. Sometimes it's going to be completely brand new. So that's what we were thinking the next step would be.
That's what's currently in our contract to do.
So there might be another additional step, because that's a very laborious process. There's a lot of elements to the comprehensive plan, and there's a lot of policies in there, so it might be part 1, part 2 kind of thing.
Okay. And we don't, like, months out, we have no idea, like, where we're at with that, or just trying to plan?
We're a little behind schedule because this Renee wanted us to wait a little longer. We were originally going to do your next round of workshops in April, but it got bumped until June, so we're actually 2 months behind. We were on target to get that next round to you in August. It's probably going to be September, October at this point.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Okay, any other questions about this exercise?
Don't forget to write your names.
And all the things you turn back, just write your name.
I'm gonna put my name on all three
Do it
right
right
now.
Get your pinkies in the air.
If we leave here,
And please encourage your friends and neighbors to participate online. There is ample opportunity for online engagement to do this exact exercise, so please encourage them to do so.
should I leave here and all of a sudden say, oh, I should have asked this? Is there anybody I can ask that question to after that? And what is the contact information?
Yes, who wants to be the resident contact?
I'll also email you funny jokes if you want. But I won't inundate your inbox. I just see myself going home thinking, oh, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I have your contact, but just to be sure. Thank you. Cleaning you out. All right, so then let's go ahead. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
I know it's a lot, and I'm sorry we didn't have more time together tonight to go through all this stuff.
All right, next item on the agenda is,
Can I just have one question? You know, I've done so many of these charrette things where you go and stick things. But there's no conversation about why you've stuck them there. You know, I'm putting them in this whole big area, but you're not really knowing why I'm thinking that this would be a good idea or where it might be. How do you go about interpreting this where it really is helpful?
That's why, feel free, if you want to put something in a sentence format that you don't feel like I'm not going to get from a sticker, please feel free to do so. There's plenty of room. And attach pages, write me a novel if you want to. It's just fine. It's just fine. I realize that you don't get everything that you want from this, although this tells me a lot. It really does. But if you feel like you need to explain something or point to it or color it in, go nuts. That's fine.
Okay, I'm good.
And it's not like you're not allowed to talk to me either, or the staff. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not like, although you can't all meet together outside of the sunshine, you are allowed to ask you're allowed to ask the staff questions and allowed to talk to me as well. So it's fine, that's all fine too. Just don't meet together after this without a properly noticed public meeting.
heck. Okay, so items for the next meeting agenda. Robin, you want to?
Sure. Really, the only set item for the next meeting agenda is the public engagement update, which will be very thorough. We'll have tables and charts that you'll be able to review in advance, and we'll be able to have a in-depth conversation about the feedback that we received. But that's all I really have set for the next agenda.
Okay, well then,
Due for an easy agenda.
I know, right?
This was a doozy.
Yes.
And as a reminder, the date is going to be adjusted in July.
So it's sooner than 4 weeks from now or a month from now.
Correct.
Do we have that date already?
We do have the date. It's I thought it was the 13th.
13th? I might have
July
it
Yeah.
13, 6 p.m., this room.
July 13th, 6 p.m. Thank you.
So it might be a good idea, given that we'll have some time, to pick a topic where we all could talk in some depth about, because we don't really get to do that. And maybe Dory or Robin, you could pick a topic that would move us ahead in some direction.
I like that. Any other thoughts on that idea?
I attended one of the outreach sessions, and I was quite impressed with the caliber of the people who directed it, members of the staff. I did come away with kind of an overarching idea, which was that we probably need to be engaging in a little bit more education of the community at large about the issues that Tarpon Springs is facing. And I think that dovetails with what Carol just said exactly. What we pick as a topic to focus on needs to be accessible to the general public. And I will tell you that I don't think it's that easy for the general public to find our website. If you go to cts.us, if you go to the city website and try to find our particular sustainability area, if you just put in the search function, you can't find it.
No, you're right.
So I think we need to work on education and specific topics.
So I just want to make sure I understand what you're proposing. So you're saying that we should have a conversation about topics to educate the community on and drill down on that?
Yes.
Is that what you were
Topics to
talking
educate or
about,
how to
Carol?
educate them, how to get the
No.
information out.
topics that provide information to the general public about what we're facing going forward.
I agree, because awareness is everything. I mean, if you can't get people to embrace what we're doing, and you're getting nothing but, pushback for really practical things that are, imminent dangers in our future that we're trying to mitigate, what we're doing here is really going to be a lot more challenging. So I think that, it's at least something to keep in our minds, that we really have to be working on how to make the message most palatable to the most stubborn people.
Well, that's why I think that the first step is to pick some topics that we want to flesh out. And, we want to communicate, right? But we have to have substance to communicate. So I think we need to find a topic and discuss it amongst us in depth and get sort of, here's the sorts of things we would like to put out. Because the STAR program is too complicated to understand. We need to simplify it in a way with a narrative to go out there. So I think we have to choose topics like trees, and shade. And the stuff we talk about in here, it's like common sense, but you don't always think about it. So if we could talk about it and put that in a good narrative, maybe with pictures, and here's an area that doesn't have trees, what would it, and find those things.
Let me give you an example of just one specific comment that was made by a person who moved here 2 years ago from West Virginia and identified himself as a dean of a college, or a former dean of a college here. He was complaining that the HOA that he is under the auspices of in where his house is located in southern aspect of Tarpon Springs somewhere, he is not allowed to drill a well so he can water his lawn. Apparently he has a very big lawn. And wondered if the city of Tarpon Springs could help him with that so he could he wouldn't have to use tap water to water his lawn. Well, from the perspective of this committee, what's an alternative that we could offer him? We could say, hey, you're in Florida, you're not in West Virginia. Lawns are a invasive monoculture. Why don't you consider, instead of drilling a well, why don't you consider using Florida native ground cover instead of a lawn? You won't need the well, and you won't need to use tap water. That's just one little example.
Yeah.
And things like rain barrels. I mean, Florida Extension has courses on.
That's another way of approaching a simple problem.
So, but I think that we need to choose a topic like that, flesh it out, get it written, and have these sort of nice things online or printed out that people can actually have and learn about this. And that way we have a nice conversation that is easy to engage with. And I think in that way we provide service, and we can also get feedback, both ways with the public.
So I'm thinking two things. One, Robin's time is stretched really thin with trying to get the framework done and get the plan out there. But I also think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So I think that part of the STAR framework is education. Like that's what parts of the components of, are. So so I think that we should be thinking about how, when we implement the STAR framework, we are going to be educating and communicating with the community about these different ideas and what that looks like. So my thought would be more a conversation about, yes, picking some topics, but not reinventing the wheel. Like there's other resources that we should be linking people to instead of like trying to come up with our own ideas. maybe putting together like a clearinghouse or ways to send folks to more information, something like that. So I think maybe for the next meeting, we should all be, within the next week, sending Robin some ideas of your priority of like what your top 3 things that you would want to start building out some educational resources on. And like I said, it doesn't have to be our resources, but linking to other resources to help educate the community about whatever 3 topics you think are really important. Heat, landscaping, recycling, whatever.
Well, heat's an interesting one, because you get trees, you get
Yep.
water, you get,
It's big. Yeah, for sure.
people understand heat.
So can we all do that then?
Yes.
Get those 3 main topics to Robin, and then we can have a discussion, maybe like rank what we want to do next week, and then start looking at potential resources and how we would want to do that. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right.
And we could talk about also the way in which we would present it.
Yes.
And I think it needs to be sort of a combination of a narrative with links
So-
and pictures.
Yeah, so be thinking about that too. How you would get the word out. All right. Public comments? It's a shame everybody left. We had public tonight. All right. Moving along to staff comments then.
Yeah, we have a couple staff comments. Some of them we already shared, like that we received the Urban Forestry Management Grant. So I believe that will consist of an inventory and a master plan. And Shannon, the arborist, will be able to hire some interns with that funding to do the inventory. So I think that's going to be really great. And I am involved in that grant on the application as the community outreach person. So I'll be involved in a way, helping with their workshops and the community outreach aspect. So there's a community outreach opportunity, which is on topic, absolutely.
So just to clarify, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understood. So it was approved for an inventory and then also creating a plan of going forward where we would put the trees?
It's
and what we
both,
would put.
I believe.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Okay. Great.
We also got a special notice by the Florida Recreation and Parks Association, FRPA, for the city's rec department's programming and outreach efforts, which positively influence mental health. They were named along with 15 other agencies throughout the state for their mental health programming. So that was a great
Congratulations
accomplishment.
to the Parks and Rec Department. That's great.
Yeah, and I'm definitely on board with our STAR framework as well. Also, Paul crunched some numbers during the meeting about our survey response rate. Our survey response rate versus the counties, and it looks like with our percentage response rate, we were about 4 to 5 times higher percentage rate than the counties.
Oh,
So,
wow. There
But
you
I will say,
go.
we're a more compact community, so
Right.
you would expect that. I think the county has a tougher time being so spread out. So not to say who's better or anything.
That helps, that's,
think
that
we're
helps put it
doing
into
well.
perspective, though. That really does, thank you.
yeah. And also, just from conversation just now, I did also want to mention that, we're still working on compiling that feedback. But one common theme we found through each workshop, through each goal area, was request for education and outreach. So it's definitely a priority in terms of what the citizens want to see. So.
Well, in terms of the 3 comments, 3 things to talk about, maybe Robin, from the survey and the public comments, you could choose 3 topics that they prioritized.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
that
we
would
can do
be
that.
good to know.
That's a good idea too. Thank you.
But that's all I have for staff comments.
Nothing else from me, thank you.
All right, committee comments? nothing? Wow, all right.
Oh, I listened to a great interview with Dwayne Elgin. It's called Choosing, and he's written a wonderful book called Choosing Earth. And I would recommend everyone look that up.
Dwayne
There's
Elgin?
Dwayne Elgin. And it
Dwayne,
had a-
like D-E-W?
Dwayne, yeah, he's got really, there. Oh, I had it here. Of course.
Jump the spot, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Beautiful, and it's a lot of really wonderful comments about it from Urban Laszlo, Joanna Macy. I don't know whether you know these people. Lane Twist. Who else read it? Bandana Shiba. I mean, recommendations, and it's about really changing the consciousness around the whole conversation of sustainability and recognizing that we are in the 11th hour closer to 12 than we would like to believe, but it's an awesome read. I mean, I was listening to a lot of his interviews on YouTube this week, and there's free PDFs on the internet, so you can look that up. It's
Last name?
Choosing Earth, and it's Elgin is Elgin.
Oh, thank you. Like the marbles.
Elgin Mark.
All right, then if we don't have anything else, to go ahead and call the meeting adjourned at 8:34.
Let me get my homework here.
I know, right? Lifelong learning, it's great.
And doing it twice is great, too.
You tried to get out of it. I know what you.
Robin, this time take a picture of everywhere you put it in case